Wait, before we continue, I need to give a bit of a trigger warning. If it isn't apparent from the title, we're going to be talking about some heavier topics like eating disorders and body dysmorphia. So if topics like that make you uncomfortable or trigger you, then I suggest that you either watch with caution or just click off the video. I understand. These depictions are like in cartoon form, but still, just in case. With that being said, let's just get straight into it. Today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite episodes of American Dad. American Dad is one of two active adult animated cartoons that Seth MacFarlane created. The most notable of them, of course, being Family Guy. But after Family Guy was initially canceled in 2002, Seth pitched American Dad to Fox, and it was greenlit, the pilot premiering after Super Bowl 39 in 2005, and the rest of the episodes airing later that year in May. The show came in at an interesting time in U.S. history, as the nation was still recovering from 9/11. And American Dad takes the classic American stereotype and satirizes it with a bit of a twist. Stan is a gun-loving, Bible-thumping right-wing Republican that works for the CIA. His wife Francine is a housewife. His son Steve is your typical nerd character. But their daughter Haley is an incredibly socially conscious libertarian. And Stan also hides an alien named Roger in his attic, and the family's pet fish Klaus is actually a German skier that got his brain swapped with a goldfish by the CIA. The show is very successful, and many regard it to be better than Family Guy, Seth's long-running and most popular show. And I think a big reason for that is the way it's written. It doesn't rely on cutaway gags as Family Guy does for humor. The humor is written like an IRL sitcom, just with like a cartoony presence. And this kind of writing really lends itself when they try to make episodes on serious or controversial topics. Some of my favorite episodes, like Season 3's Lincoln Lover or Season 4's Surrogate, are episodes where Stan's political and spiritual views are put into question, and becomes a better person because of it. In Lincoln Lover, he learns to end his bigoted hatred for gay people and accept them for who they are. And in Surrogate, despite him being okay with gay people now, he at first didn't believe that a gay couple should raise a child. But by the end of the episode, he realizes that same-sex parents are just as good as straight parents. To learn that lesson, he did kidnap a fucking newborn, but still, he learned his lesson and grew because of it. But my favorite example of this is the episode, the American Dad After School Special. After school specials from the 70s to 90s were programming that would usually tackle controversial or socially relevant issues like puberty, bullying, teen pregnancy, drug abuse, and body image, made mainly for tweens and teens alike, and would normally air around the same time most kids would return home from school, hence the after school title. Now, for a show mainly meant for older teens and adults, the after school special title didn't make much sense to me until I watched it. And in this episode, they tackle body image issues, and in a well done and entertaining way. This is the main story of the episode. Steve falls for a goth overweight girl named Debbie, and when Steve brings her home for dinner one night, Stan immediately freaks out, makes the family go into their panic room, gets angry at Steve for dating an overweight girl, and makes inflammatory comments about Debbie's weight. Haley and Francine try to get Stan to open the door and apologize, but he won't budge. And after Steve leaves to go get Debbie, Haley and Francine bring up to Stan that he has no right to criticize somebody's weight, as he himself has let himself go.
Good God, it's true! I've become one of them! Ah!
And from this point forward, Stan gets incredibly in his head and self-conscious and starts to diet and exercise furiously. And a bit of a less important B-plot is that Roger is trying to court Debbie, despite her not only being with Steve, but Roger is canonically 1,600 years old, trying to court a potential high school student. But yeah, whatever, I guess. As the episode progresses, Stan continues to work out furiously and refuses to eat food, almost at all. He becomes increasingly obsessed with losing weight, and despite all of his efforts, he seems to be gaining more weight. And at first we're suspicious of Stan's family, as they seemingly have an obsession with trying to get him to eat, or getting him fatter. Stan is now under the impression that they are trying to make him overweight so that he can empathize with Debbie and end his criticism and hyperfixation of her appearance. This theory is further backed up as the scene right after this revelation, Francine and Haley are seen injecting lard into his food. His issue peaks at work, however, when he seems to have gotten even bigger and is unable to complete a training exercise, and his boss suspends him until he fixes his weight problem. And finally, it cuts to a scene where Stan enters the kitchen and the entire family is sitting there intervention style. We finally understand why Francine and Haley were so obsessed with trying to get him to gain weight, and I'll just play the entire scene.
I was just fine until you all decided to teach me a lesson by scheming against me. Now even my boss says I have a weight problem.
You do have a weight problem, but it's not that you're too fat.
Dad, we've done some research, and we think you're anorexic.
What?
You keep thinking you're fat no matter how skinny you get.
That's ridiculous! Look at me!
It's worse than we thought.
I know! I'm a huge tub of lard!
No, you aren't. You're just suffering from a delusional state.
And there it is. We find out Stan became anorexic. The reveal is done really well. Throughout the entire episode, Stan seems to be getting fatter and fatter, and we are way more on Stan's side, being suspicious of his family, but then we come to realize that it was all in his head, and that he was actually getting super thin. Something I left out is that Stan meets a personal trainer named Zach that continuously pushes him to exercise, constantly berating him for his weight.
I'll do anything to look like you. When can we start?
Don't waste time asking questions when you should be rocking it. Exercise is everywhere. See those kids? Potential barbells. Now rock me 200.
Shut up and help me count!
And during the same reveal of his anorexia, we find out that Zach is a hallucination.
Delusional? I'm not delusional. Tell him, Zach.
Bro, don't listen to them.
Stan, there's no one there. Who are you talking to?
As the episode continues, Stan's family tries to help him get better by getting him to eat more and attending group therapy. Steve also begins to suspect that his relationship with Debbie is the reason why Stan is suffering from anorexia, that very incident traumatizing Stan and making him more self-conscious. So he breaks up with Debbie out of care for his dad, and Roger goes on to court her, or attempt to court her. These efforts get immediately thwarted by one of the girls in the therapy sessions, Veronica. Veronica teaches Stan how to hide away food from his family so that they'll just think he's getting better, when in reality, no real change is happening. The episode reaches its peak at a restaurant. Stan, in an attempt to help Steve get over Debbie, he invites Steve out to dinner with him and Veronica, while at the same time, Roger is trying to dupe Debbie into a date. While on this date, Haley and Francine find out that Stan had just been hiding his food and hasn't been eating. So they leave the house and go confront him at the restaurant. And after the entire family gets rightfully mad at Stan for lying to them, Steve stands up for himself, stating that he was happy with Debbie and didn't care about her weight. And after that speech that Debbie overheard because, cartoon, of course, she was right next to him during that speech, Stan starts to realize that not only are Steve and Debbie happy together, but Stan's obsessive behavior has been hurting himself and those around him. Finally realizing that he has a problem and seeks to gain his weight back. Even Zach disappears when he comes to this revelation.
Hand me those rolls.
Don't do it, bro. You're a fatty. No! No! Bro!
And with that, the episode ends. The reason why I talk about this episode so highly is because it found the perfect balance of being funny while covering a sensitive topic, which in a comedy show is extremely important. If it is too funny, the message is lost, as it doesn't seem to be taken seriously. If the episode's too serious, the message can also get lost, as the show is no longer enjoyable. And we also need to remember the context. This originally aired in 2006, and in the early 2000s, mental health and eating disorders were not as widely talked about as they have been in the last decade. So for it to get its message across really well and not feel dated after 16 years is really saying something. The reason why I emphasized everyone's character archetype is because that plays a key role in making this episode work. Stan, as a right-wing conservative Republican, is naturally apprehensive towards many things, as we know, obesity being one of them, something that is still an issue today, unfortunately. God damn it, Kanye, why? So when faced with such adversity, he lashed out. Steve dating a plus-size woman wasn't the main issue. He put his insecurities on Debbie, and when he was forced to confront his weight issue, he developed body dysmorphia, and then became anorexic. In a roundabout way, he learned to not only somewhat empathize with Debbie, but also realize that Steve deserves to be happy and to let him be. Now, Stan in later episodes would continue to make jabs at Debbie's weight, but he eventually came around to Debbie in one of her last appearances on the show. Teaching a conservative white man empathy takes some time, people. And the comedy and commentary and anorexia itself were well done. The animation choice of making Stan seemingly get bigger and bigger until the reveal was really smart. The audience can empathize with him as we see his insecurities through his lens until we figure out what was going on. It also gives the viewer a scope into how people with anorexia may look at themselves, suffering from delusion and not realizing that they are getting skinnier rather than bigger. And the personal trainer Zach was not just there as like a funny joke of, oh, he's going crazy. Zach was kind of a comedic representation of someone's mental state when suffering from anorexia. Somebody may harbor a lot of self-hatred and anxiety when suffering from this. Hence why Zach would constantly call Stan a fatty, attack him for his weight, and on top of that, he was the one that made Stan paranoid that his family was plotting against him, trying trying to make him bigger so he could sympathize with Debbie. And when Zach disappears when Stan starts eating the rolls, it represents Stan starting to let go of these insecurities and wanting to better himself. They even managed to make some jabs at Stan being a man suffering from anorexia, despite anorexia being a problem more common in women than in men. But the jokes are made in a way that doesn't seem super insensitive, and it's actually funny.
Living with an anorexic can be a real challenge.
How did this happen?
Well, when young girls like your father get this disease, it's usually the result of a jarring event. Was he recently cut from the cheerleading squad?
I feel like more serious episodes work way better in American Dad than in Family Guy because of the way the humor is written. In a banned episode of Family Guy that talks about the controversial topic of abortion, it takes them 2/3 of the episode to actually get to that debate. And even beforehand, the impact is lessened after the episode crammed 14 minutes of storylines that end up not going anywhere. Toward the end, they do give some very insightful commentary on the abortion debate, but it comes in really late into the episode and didn't have the time to properly develop. But the after-school special weaves the topic in throughout the entire episode. At the end of the day, it's an all-around funny and somewhat lighthearted episode despite the uncomfortable subject matter. As somebody who suffers from body dysmorphia, this episode makes me feel a bit better about myself and helps me realize that obsessive behavior won't get me anywhere. So it definitely has a special place in my heart. So if you get the chance, I would highly suggest watching this episode, if possible. And if you or someone you know may be suffering from issues like this, I will have links to some support pages in the description. Please remember you are not alone. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. This is kind of like my first time stepping out of my comfort zone and like reviewing like a TV show. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next week, I think I'm finally gonna go in on this bitch-ass nigga Matt Walsh. Bro, I hate him so much. He just feeds his brainwashed virgin fan base these garbage political ideals, bro. Gets on my fucking nerve.
Die, calories, die!